In particular, what I wanted to address today is the whole idea of going through different paradigms when you go and you build a business, right? So I've been building a business for over 5 years now. And what I've learned in that 5 years is that you actually go through different phases of being an entrepreneur. So what do I mean by that? So let's say that you start. When I started, it was because I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek, and it inspired me to build a business. And I decided, you know what? I'm gonna do something to change my life. I wasn't happy just working a 9-to-5. I wanted to build a business and escape the rat race. And originally, my whole idea of building a business was that I'm gonna work as little as possible. I'm gonna work smarter than everyone else, and that's gonna allow me to become free. And so using that paradigm, I, of course, worked hard. And, it was coming from a place of I'm building on something. I'm not just working, spinning my wheels, making somebody else rich, building someone else's dream, but I'm actually building my own dream. So every moment that I'm spending working on my own dream is propelling me forward to this sort of like promised land, this magical wonderland of, not having to work anymore, sitting on the beach and doing nothing, basically. That was my dream. And I thought that everyone that said that was bullshit and was like, you won't be happy and you're just gonna wanna work again and it's not what it's cracked up to be. I'm like, bitch, you don't know what the fuck I've been through. You don't know how hard I've worked in my life at these menial jobs. You have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm gonna be super happy doing nothing. So that's what I thought, right? I thought I was smarter than everyone that told me, that you need to have a sense of fulfillment in your life. You need to work on something you're passionate about. To me, I was like, that's bullshit, right? Like, I just want to do nothing. That's what actually matters to me. And so as I started building the business, I noticed that I wasn't actually building it as quickly as I thought I was going to. And furthermore, I noticed other people that were also building similar businesses, building their business way faster than I could. And I was wondering why they were getting all these good results and I wasn't. And it sort of dawned on me that at first I thought maybe it's because they're smarter than me. Maybe it's because they're working smarter than me. Maybe that's why. Maybe they just have these tips and tricks and tactics that I don't, and that's why they're able to get ahead of me so much quicker. And to a certain extent, that could have been true. But what I learned after really digging deep and actually contacting some of these people that were just killing it in the same industry I was in, and probing on what they were doing, I noticed that a lot of them actually didn't have as good of tactics as I had. Like, they actually had worse ways of implementing certain things like hiring, operations, managing the business, scaling the business, different sort of marketing tactics. Their tactics weren't as good as I perceived mine to be. And what I realized was that they were just putting in a shit ton more effort than I was. And I was like, well, shit. I guess that's what it is. I guess it's just the fact that I'm, not putting in enough effort. And that idea was something that I didn't let land for 4 years. 4 years I built my business and I tried to do the least amount of work possible. I mean, I delegated everything and I thought I was working smart. And I was like, you know what? If you work smart, you don't need to work hard because you're already, miles ahead of people that are working hard because you're just working smart. So because you're so smart, and because you've developed all these tactics and tools and strategies, you don't have to work hard. And I realized my business was suffering because of it. And what I learned is that in the end, it was funny. I actually started working harder. Over the last year, I really took responsibility and said, you know what? I'm gonna give it a fair shake. I'm actually gonna go through the process of building this correctly. Not in the sense of like half-assing it and doing the least. Here's what it really was. My paradigm before was I'm gonna try to do the least amount of effort possible to get this done and still grow it because I'm so smart. And what I realized was that's not enough. And if you come at building a business with the idea that you're gonna do the least amount of work possible, then at best, you're gonna have mediocre success. And that's only if you have the best tactics, the best strategies, the best automations, everything is just really dialed in and you have something that's basically running on autopilot. What I realized was that even if you have that sort of quote unquote passive income coming in, it doesn't last, because every moment, every hour, every day that you are languishing in comfort, your competitors are getting smarter. They're learning new things. They're finding more ingenious ways of operating, of marketing. They're distancing themselves from you, and they're becoming better, and you're not. So even if you do have something like a business, let's say, that's doing really well, you're basically running it on autopilot, it's only a matter of time before that is going to change. And that's what I realized. And my business actually started going down in year 4. So it had been going up every year steadily. And then in year 4, it started to go down. And I realized it was because I wasn't putting in the effort, because I was so comfortable with it just running on autopilot. And I thought this was just going to be the way it was forever. It's just going to keep going up. And the revenue is just going to keep going higher and higher and higher forever. And I don't have to do anything, because I'm just so smart, and I just have such a good business plan, and the structure of the business is so well structured that I don't have to work hard. And that just isn't the case. So instead, what I realized is that what I needed to do was fall in love with the grind. And if you listen to people like Ty Lopez or David Goggins, they talk about this. They talk about how, as opposed to trying to be as comfortable as possible, because your DNA is telling you to avoid comfort by all means necessary, instead, what you can do is you can try, and I mean, this is just what I tried. What I decided that I was going to do was I was going to, as David Goggins says, I was going to callous my mind by becoming as uncomfortable as possible, by stressing myself as much as possible. Not in a bad way where you're not recovering properly. And trust me, I still try to recover properly. As you can see, I'm like in nature right now recovering. You know, I go to the sauna, I do the cold plunge, I always sleep enough, or at the very least 95% of the time I'm getting enough sleep. I work out, so I do all the stuff that it is replenishing my energy and helping me to recover. But at the same time, I'm not hiding from the stress anymore of building a business. That's another thing I was doing, is I was subconsciously trying not to build the business too big, because I was like, well, that's going to be more responsibility, it's going to be more stress, I'm going to have to deal with more shit, there's going to be more complaints, there's probably going to be things that I haven't dealt with yet. Like once you break the $1 million mark, you start to have to deal with, tax issues and things like that. And at the time, I didn't want to do that, right? And so now that I've dealt with every single one of those issues that I just mentioned, I realized that it wasn't that bad at all. And the benefits of actually building a business you can be proud of is way more fulfilling than the possible downsides or negatives of having to deal with the stress of doing that. So what I realized is that as opposed to trying to avoid hard work and rationalizing it by being like, I'm so smart and I'm working smart, and so it's okay that I do this because I'm smarter than the others, so they have to work hard, but I don't. No. What I realized was that I don't want to try to avoid hard work, because that's making me soft. It's making me undisciplined, and it's just the downward spiral into shit. And instead, what I realized was that I need to go on an upward spiral of constantly challenging myself more and more, but not in a way where I'm like trying to push myself. Like I try to get accountability coaches to push me to work on my business. I try to set up things on my wall, like put stuff on my wall to remind me to stay motivated. None of that shit worked. I tried Pomodoro timers, like anything you can think of to try to motivate yourself, I tried. Setting myself challenges, putting money on the line, everything. And deep down, I was like thinking like it shouldn't have to be this hard. Like there's people that just do this for the love of the game. They go through so much more suffering than I'm putting myself through voluntarily without anybody pushing them, because they love it. And I was like, how can I get to that point where I just love it? Because then none of this shit, like I'm going to a new paradigm. Like the old paradigm is that I have to push myself to work hard. And there's all these things. I'm trying to optimize this paradigm of pushing myself to work hard with all these external pressures pointing at me to try to push me. And I realized that that's not the answer. The answer isn't to create these external paradigms, external pressures to try to push yourself to work on your business. The answer is to elevate yourself to the next paradigm, which is actually falling in love with the suffering and the pain that you inflict upon yourself when you're deep in the trenches of building your business. So that's what I realized. I realized that if I wanted to get to the next level, I needed to fall in love with the grind. And weirdly, when I started actually taking pride in doing that, like I kind of created an ego identity around being the guy who works hard. I'm like, you know what? As opposed to having this ego identity around being the smart guy, not that I'm even that smart, that's debatable. But more like, as opposed to being the guy that was like clever enough to create this business so I don't have to work hard, I was like, nah, let me instead create an ego identity around being the guy that works hard. Because I realized that if you start working hard, it's not like you're going to stop working smart. You might go into periods where you're like, okay, why am I doing this? I need to delegate this. This is weird. But at the same time, I realized that like once I hit that point where I was like, damn, how much time can I put into my business today? Like how many hours of grinding, not updating my Facebook page and doing menial shit like that, but like actually deep work. Like Cal Newport says in his book, Deep Work. How many hours per day are you putting into actual deep work where you're focused and you're doing stuff that nobody else but you can do, right? Like you're doing stuff that only the owner of the business can do. And when I started to create an identity around that, started to create an ego around that of like, how much of that can I do? Something changed in me where I started to be prideful about how much work I could put into my business. And weirdly, everything started to work a lot better. It's like, what do you know? Now we're doing our best months ever in terms of revenue. We're also, this is the big thing, is we're also doing our best months ever in terms of profit. So that's a really important point because, let's say you build $1 million business, but you're not keeping any of that money, then you're working super hard for nothing. What really, really matters in a business is how much profit you keep, right? Or the business keeps. So highest revenue, highest profits also, which are two things that usually don't go together, right? Usually with more revenue, it's less profit because there's more overhead, there's more expenses to try to generate that profit. And weirdly, here's the weirdest part of all, is I have more fulfillment. Like I actually feel more fulfilled working on my business now, even though I'm putting in more work every day than I ever did before, where I was just like, quote unquote, trying to get away with doing the least amount possible. I didn't feel fulfilled. And that's so infuriating to somebody that's in the paradigm of trying to do the least amount of work, because you worked super hard originally so that you could build a business, so that you could not do anything. And then now that you're not doing anything, you feel like shit. And you're like, what the fuck? And you try to fill up your life with all these diversions and all these things to sort of like distract yourself from the fact that you don't feel fulfilled. And then in the end, it comes all back down to, well, I guess I'll just work on my business and now I feel fulfilled. What do you know? The thing I was trying to avoid most, when I finally just went through it instead of around it, I now feel super fulfilled, and my external results are better than they ever have been, right? So it's weird, but the biggest realization I had was going from that 4-hour work week paradigm of, how can I do the least amount of work and get the most amount of results, which made me avoid work and made me avoid suffering and made me soft and made me lazy and in my eyes kind of pathetic, to the paradigm of like, okay, how can I put the most amount of work in my business? Still working smart, not doing stupid shit that I can delegate and just doing it for the sake of doing it, something that's like a $5 an hour task. Just doing it to save $5 an hour. No, nothing like that. But putting in the deep work, that stuff that only the owner of the business can do. And how many hours of that can you do every day and work on your business? And weirdly, as you start to do that, you start to enjoy it, you start to love it, you start to get fulfillment out of it, which is the biggest thing, because, like Tony Robbins says, success without fulfillment is not success. If you're super successful, but you're not fulfilled in what you're doing, you're fucking up, right? So that's basically what I learned. And hopefully this will help you. Hopefully right now, if you're building your business and you're in that, kind of mode where you're trying to avoid work, and you're like, how can I get away with doing the least amount of work possible? You kind of have your one foot on the gas, the other foot on the brake. Realize that no matter how many accountability buddies you get, no matter how much you create a chart and look at it every day to try to motivate yourself and push yourself, no matter how many external things you're building, these external structures you're building to keep yourself motivated. All right, so I was just reviewing the video and it looks like I cut off at the most important part, so I'm re-recording it for you guys. Pro tip, if you have a timer set on your iPhone, make sure that you're not recording a video, because when that timer goes off, your video will cut off. What I was gonna say is that no matter how many of these external things that you put into place to try to motivate yourself, you're doing so from a lower paradigm. You're trying to optimize the lower paradigm of how can I motivate myself to work on my business, as opposed to going to the higher paradigm, which is I'm falling in love with the grind. I love the work that I'm doing. Yes, it's kind of suffering and it's kind of painful and it kind of sucks, but overall, if you fall in love with it, you are going to outwork the shit out of your competition and you're going to crush it. So, wish you the best. Thanks for watching. Peace.